Line is approaching that will soon impact the types of documents that will help you travel. Jen Sullivan breaks down what you need to know in today's Consumer Watch.
Some big changes are coming to what documents travelers need to board a domestic flight and or cross the border. As of May 7, 2025, a traditional driver's license will no longer be accepted by TSA or U.S. Border Patrol. Instead, anyone 18 and older will need to present either a passport or a document known as a Real ID or an enhanced license. You'll also need one of these to enter a federal building. So what is a Real ID? Following the 9/11 attacks, the federal government set new security standards to obtain a state-issued driver's license and ID card, and some states began issuing them more than a decade ago. The standards will soon be enforced for people in all 50 U.S. states, territories, and D.C. The Real IDs in most states have a star in the top right corner. Some states, like California, may have a slight variation to the design, but the star will still be there. So, what do you need to obtain a Real ID? Some states may require proof of Social Security, either your original Social Security card or a tax document or pay stub showing your full Social Security number. Some states may require two proofs of residency, like a utility bill or bank statement, proof of status, such as a U.S. passport, U.S. birth certificate, or permanent resident card, and proof of citizenship if you're not a U.S. citizen. Remember, some DMVs require you to make an appointment in advance, so plan ahead. For Consumer Watch, I'm Jen Sullivan.